The train tore itself away from the city so abruptly that it felt less like a departure and more like a violent extraction. As if the world behind me had suddenly become incompatible with the man I was supposed to be when this journey ended. I was racing toward my mother, a woman who had lived most of her life wrapped in secrets, carefully woven layers of silence that neither I nor anyone else had ever managed to peel back. Her sudden request to come, as soon as possible, was heavy in a way that told me something inside her had finally cracked. The air in the compartment felt too still, too condensed. I tried to breathe deeply, but the tension in my chest barely let the air in. It wasn't just anxiety, it was the visceral sense that something irreversible was waiting for me. A truth, perhaps. Or a wound that had been sealed for years and now demanded to bleed again. Outside the window, winter fields rushed by, pale, lifeless, covered in a film of frozen fog that blurred every line and horizon. The world looked as if it were withholding clarity on purpose, refusing to show me what awaited ahead. The rhythm of the wheels hit the tracks with a sharp metallic pulse, syncing with the throbbing at my temples. That sound seemed to echo the pressure inside me, as if the train itself was forcing me to listen to the inevitability of the approaching conversation. I tried to settle into the narrow seat, resting my hands on my knees, but instead felt like a man being transported to a verdict. No amount of quiet could soften the sense that I was being pulled into the past, not my own, but my mother's, full of corners she had never allowed anyone to see. I closed my eyes, attempting to drown in the monotony of movement. But the moment the compartment door slid open, everything inside me snapped into focus. She stepped in, and my world shifted course. She entered the compartment in a rush of cold air and urgency, carrying winter with her as though it clung to her clothes. Her presence arrived before my mind could register her. A massive bouquet of white lilies filled her arms, so many that they looked like a living, breathing creature devouring half the space. The sweet, heavy scent enveloped the compartment instantly, pushing away the sterile smell of train metal. Her face was pale, stretched thin by exhaustion. Yet beneath the fatigue there was something razor-sharp, a determination carved out of pain, an energy that made me straighten instinctively. She didn't glance at me. She moved with the distracted precision of someone who had spent too long holding herself together by force alone. The bouquet landed on the upper berth, and for a moment she exhaled as if the weight she'd been carrying was heavier than the flowers. Even without eye contact, she commanded the entire compartment. It wasn't beauty, though she had it. It was the intensity. The quiet storm beneath her skin. Every movement felt charged, as if her very existence in that confined space altered the temperature. The lines of her face held stories, loss, hesitation, perhaps guilt, written too deeply to ignore. I felt the unsettling pull of recognition, the inexplicable sense that this woman, this stranger, was connected to something in me I didn't yet understand. And even though she said nothing, and I said nothing, there was already an invisible current between us, the kind that appears rarely, unpredictably, and leaves you wondering how a single moment can shift your entire awareness. The silence grew dense, gaining weight with every passing mile. It was the kind of silence that doesn't leave room for small talk or distractions. It forces attention, forces awareness. She sat across from me, her posture tense, her gaze fixed on the window without actually seeing anything beyond it. Without warning, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small black box. Her hand trembled just slightly as she held it, not from weakness, but from restraint. It was the shaking of someone containing an emotion too large for their chest, someone preparing themselves for a blow they already knew they could not avoid. The box rested against her palm with an almost unbearable significance. She stared at it for a long moment, breath caught between movements, and I could feel her conflict, almost taste it in the air. Open it and face the ache. Close it and remain suspended in dread. Both choices hurt. Watching her felt like watching a storm form behind glass. You're safe enough not to be destroyed by it, but close enough to feel the shifts in pressure. My attention sharpened until I could sense the texture of her pain, the tension in her jaw, the subtle twitch in her brow. I had no right to feel such closeness to a stranger, yet I did. My heartbeat synced with the wheels of the train, speeding up without my permission. Something primal inside me reacted not to her beauty, but to the gravity of her presence, the magnetism of a person on the edge of unraveling. I had a growing suspicion that this woman carried a story that could ruin her, and ruin whoever stood close enough to witness it. Darkness swallowed the train so completely it felt as though we were moving through a void, suspended between worlds. Only the faintest glimmer from passing towns flickered across her face, illuminating the curve of her cheek, the faint tremor of her eyelashes as fatigue finally overtook her. She drifted into sleep slowly, resisting it at first, then surrendering. As she leaned back, her head tilted ever so slightly toward me, and a soft lock of hair brushed the space near my shoulder. It was not a touch, not even an accidental connection, but it hit me with the force of a physical jolt. Her breathing steadied, deepened, becoming rhythmic. I listened without meaning to, drawn to it as if it held the key to everything she hadn't said. Her vulnerability in sleep was disarming. The iron strength she'd projected melted away, revealing a fragility so human it felt sacred. A warmth ignited in me, quiet but dangerously bright. It wasn't desire. It wasn't infatuation. It was something older, deeper, a recognition that made no logical sense. As if my body understood something my mind refused to articulate. I sat rigid, caught between the need to distance myself and the impossible pull toward her invisible gravity. The air felt too intimate, too charged. Every shift of her breath tightened something in me. The night grew heavier, pressing down on us with its silence. I tried to close my eyes, but the awareness of her presence kept me awake, anchored in a state between longing and dread. I feared the dawn not because it would end something, but because it would expose everything. The morning arrived reluctantly, gray and cold, seeping into the compartment with a chill that felt sharper than the night before. She opened her eyes slowly, as if surfacing from a dream she wasn't ready to leave, or one she desperately wanted to forget. The fatigue on her face was now joined by something else, a heavy resolve, a bracing for impact. Her hand reached once again for the black box. This time there was no hesitation. She opened it, and the hinge made a barely audible click that felt far louder in the silence. Inside lay an old photograph. A young woman. A soft smile. Eyes full of warmth and tragedies yet to come. The image vibrated with emotion, years of longing, regret, unanswered questions. I didn't know who the woman was, but the pain radiating from my fellow traveler was unmistakable. She held the photograph so tightly her knuckles whitened. The way her fingers trembled around the edges told me this picture was not just memory, it was a wound. A wound she was finally forced to look at. The train began to slow. The metallic groan of braking filled the compartment, dragging us back into the present moment. She closed the box with a soft movement, but her expression had shifted, grief carved along her features, but beneath it, a fierce determination. I felt something inside me unravel, empathy so deep it bordered on ache, and along with it, a quiet, dangerous longing to stay near her, to understand her story, to protect her from whatever was waiting at the end of the tracks. But the closer we came to the station, the more the air tightened around us. There was a sense of inevitability, a feeling that the ground ahead was already cracked, ready to open. And I still didn't know that the truth waiting at the station would tear apart everything I believed about myself, and about her. The train slowed into the station with a long metallic groan that felt almost mournful, as if the machine itself understood the heaviness of the moment. She rose before I did, gathering the enormous bouquet of lilies with a kind of reverence, her movements measured, ceremonial. It felt wrong to watch her leave, wrong to let her walk into whatever sorrow awaited her, but I remained in my seat, anchored by hesitation. She stepped onto the platform first, disappearing into a swirl of cold air and scattered passengers. I followed a moment later, unsure why, or perhaps too aware of the pull that drew me after her. There was no logic in it. Only instinct. Only the undeniable sense that something about this woman intersected with my life in ways I could not yet comprehend. The air outside was sharp enough to bite. People moved quickly, their faces wrapped in scarves and urgency. She stood still, holding the bouquet, clutching the black box against her chest. And then, with stiff, trembling steps, she walked toward the exit of the station. I didn't call out to her. I simply followed at a distance. Not stalking, just unable to let go. And then I saw where she went. Into the arms of an older woman, my mother. My breath froze. The bouquet of lilies crushed between them. My mother's face collapsing into silent grief. The stranger trembling in her embrace. In that moment, the truth hit me with such force that the ground felt unsteady. She wasn't merely connected to my mother. She was tied to something deeper. Something hidden. And I felt the first crack in the foundation of my life. My mother's eyes met mine over the woman's shoulder, wide, frightened, almost pleading. Not for forgiveness, not for understanding, but for patience. For time. For the right to explain before everything detonated. The woman I had traveled with stepped back slightly, and I could see the raw pain still etched across her features. She wasn't surprised to see me, but the recognition in her eyes was strange, almost haunted, as if some part of her had expected this moment. My mother took my hand and led me away, her grip cold, nearly shaking. She didn't speak until we reached her car, but even then, her voice was thin, barely holding together. "She's here for someone," my mother said. "Someone we both lost." I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand. But the words wouldn't form. The weight of everything, the train, the silence, the photograph, the lilies, the embrace, pressed on my chest until breathing became labor. At her house, the truth spilled slowly, painfully, like an old wound opening under pressure. Years ago, before I was born, before the man I called my father existed, my mother had loved someone else. A brief, hidden marriage. A life she never spoke of because it had broken her. The man died young. And with him, her first child disappeared into another family. A daughter. A daughter she had searched for all her life. A daughter who had spent years searching back. The woman from the train. My fellow traveler. My blood. My sister. The world seemed to tilt. Heat and cold collided inside my chest. The recognition I had felt, the impossible connection, now made horrifying sense. Something deep and instinctive had known the truth before I did. And still I felt everything I shouldn't. I tried to bury the emotions. To smother the pull I had felt on the train. To erase the warmth that had sparked when she fell asleep beside me. But the human heart does not surrender to commands. It rebels, clings, resists the logic that tries to tame it. She arrived at the house later that afternoon. My mother greeted her with the fragile tenderness of someone given a second chance at life. And I stood in the doorway, unable to manage anything except a stiff nod. Her eyes met mine. And everything we shouldn't have felt pressed between us, heavy and undeniable. But now it was tainted. Not forbidden by society, but forbidden by blood. The truth didn't erase the memory of the journey. It only contorted it. All the tension of the night, the strange longing, the silent intimacy, it all twisted into something sharp, something that cut deeper the more I tried to look away. During dinner, she spoke quietly, telling fragments of her life, her adoptive family, the death that had brought her here, the reason for the lilies she carried. But every time her voice trembled, my pulse reacted. Every time her hands shook, something inside me echoed. I hated myself for it. I hated the truth for arriving too late. When she excused herself and stepped into the cold night outside, I followed her. Not to confess anything, but because the air between us was too charged to ignore. She stood beneath the bare branches of the old garden tree, her breath rising like smoke in the freezing air. "We shouldn't talk," she whispered, though I had said nothing. "No," I agreed. "We shouldn't." Her voice broke slightly. "Yet here we are." And for the first time, I understood what true torment felt like. That night stretched into something that felt outside of time. She stayed in the guest room. I paced my childhood bedroom like a man trapped in a cage. Every attempt to force myself into numbness only magnified the ache. I replayed every moment from the train, her trembling fingers, her broken sleep, her breath brushing the darkness between us. Now each memory felt poisoned with a truth that made it both unbearable and unforgettable. Around midnight I went downstairs for water, hoping the cold would steady me. Instead, I found her standing in the dim glow of the kitchen light, staring at the lilies she had placed in a vase. She didn't turn when I entered. She didn't have to, she felt me. Her voice came low, strained. I thought meeting her would heal something in me. I swallowed hard. Did it? No, she whispered. It only opened everything I spent my life trying to survive. She exhaled shakily, pressing her hand to her face as if trying to hold herself together. And meeting you. Her voice fractured. I don't know what to do with that. The words hit me like a physical impact, because they mirrored exactly what I felt. I wanted to step closer. I wanted to step back. I couldn't do either. Something in me snapped, not into action, but into surrender. Surrender to the truth that we were bound by a connection we could neither pursue nor break. When she finally turned to face me, there was anguish in her eyes. A plea. A warning. We have to choose the pain that saves us, she said. And without another word, she left the kitchen, her steps soft, final, devastating. Her absence in the room felt like a wound. A clean, deep cut I knew I would carry forever. Morning came with a cold, merciless clarity, the kind that strips away illusions and leaves only the bare truth. She had packed her things early. I heard the soft sounds of suitcases, footsteps, the gentle murmur of her voice as she spoke with my mother. A goodbye wrapped in tenderness and years of lost time. She didn't come to see me. She didn't know me that. And maybe it was better this way. But when she stepped outside to wait for her car, I found myself following. Not out of hope, but out of the need to close something that would otherwise remain open forever. She stood by the gate, wrapped in a coat too thin for the cold. When she finally looked at me, her eyes held a depth I knew I would never escape. No train, she said quietly. No silence. No dark compartments. Just the truth now. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We weren't meant to meet like that, she continued. And yet, maybe the world needed us to meet, just once, to reveal everything that had been hidden. Her breath trembled. My life changed in those few hours. So did mine, I whispered. She lowered her gaze, and for a moment, I saw all the emotion we would never be allowed to speak aloud. The almost love. The almost fate. The almost story that could have become everything, if not for the blood that bound us. We walk separate roads now, she said. But they began in the same place. Her car arrived, stopping with a quiet hum. She stepped toward it, hesitated, then looked back at me one last time. Take care of yourself, she whispered. It was both a goodbye and a mercy. She left. The gate closed behind her. The cold wind swallowed her silhouette. And I remained standing there, knowing that the brief, impossible connection we shared would live inside me like a scar, not one that harms, but one that reminds. The journey had brought us together. Truth had torn us apart. And the rest of my life would be shaped by the ache of what could never be.